director, you're a dramaturg, and you're an artistic director. Those are different roles for a new piece, or any piece, actually. As the artistic director, when do you come into this process, and when do you come into the process? And I guess it's really show by show.
It varies.
And if you were the director on a process, what would you want you as the artistic director to do? Do you want the artistic director this is you, Oskar. Do you want an artistic director to have notes, or do you want the artistic director to leave you alone?
I wouldn't sort of tie it to job position. When I direct, I have always counted on smart people involved with the show, who care about the show, telling me what they think. And sometimes that's the artistic director, sometimes it's the dramaturg, usually it's my assistant director, whoever it is. Sometimes it's outside friends who come in and give me notes during previews. But I always want notes, and I always want smart notes, and smart doesn't have to mean intellectual, just as we all know, there's lots of people who have fantastic theater savvy who are not necessarily intellectual. But what it means is that it's got to be somebody who's actually responding to the show they see and the show that I want to make. And I don't like it, and I try to keep this in mind as artistic director, I don't like to ever feel like somebody's forcing me to do something.
All right.
And I try to never do that as a director. I will occasionally argue really passionately about something if I feel really strongly about it. But I try to make it clear at all times that once I've hired a director and once I've hired a playwright, that I'm not going to be in charge of what it turns out to be. I am trusting them to have the final judgment on that.
And then shows that go to Broadway, like Hair and Fun Home and Hamilton, all three which actually ended up winning a Tony Award for Best Musical or Best Revival. The process between the Public Theater and Broadway, I'm sure that all three of them were different, but is your involvement strong from your theater to the Broadway theater?
Yes.
And what is your involvement?
On Hamilton and Fun Home and most of the shows that we move, our involvement is literally as friends of the court. We don't have any control over what happens. So my influence, and Mandy's influence, because Mandy does a lot of the work with the commercial producers, is limited to moral suasion, what other people find useful. And we're fortunate enough that our commercial partners and the artists that we work with often find our continued involvement useful. But if I'm not a GP, you guys know this, I don't have say over anything. And so what I just try to do is the same thing I was doing downtown, just being a advocate for the best version of the show. And I will say one of the things I'm very proud of, those three shows, and I think this is really true of every show that we've moved, has improved between the Public Theater and Broadway. We haven't compromised it, we haven't made it worse, we haven't let it decay, we've continued working hard, and each of them got better in the course of that transfer.
Yeah, I saw all three. I would agree with that. I mean, they were fantastic down at the Public Theater, but the work that was done, because it's so easy, I find, having, as a lighting designer and somewhat being on the outside, to see just one little thread pulled out of a musical or out of a play, and the entire play or musical gets destroyed.
That's right.
Those three pieces are pieces where that didn't happen at all, but just got better.
But if I could make, let's take, because they're more recent, Fun Home and Hamilton as specific examples. In both of those cases, Kristen and Mike in terms of Fun Home and Jeffrey Seller in terms of Hamilton, those guys had the same relationship to the show downtown as I had uptown. They had no control over it. Again, they don't get to make choices downtown, but they were friends of the court, and they were in on our discussions and contemplations just as much as I was uptown. So that there was a continuity of producing and a continuity of intentionality that is tremendously helpful. So we're not passing the show off to somebody who hasn't been involved in the show.